Hello there, I'm ANCHORPETE, and I'm here with my wife, Shari T. We just watched the third episode of Mare of Easttown. And what was it called? It's time for number 2? Or?
Enter number 2.
Enter number 2, okay.
So many jokes there.
Yes, that was going to be the thumbnail.
Because we're immature.
Yes, but Shari wanted to keep it classy, so that's why we made the thumbnail the way it is right now. But, guys, so much happened in this episode. It was pretty great. Shari, I think I'm liking this show more and more with each episode. What about you?
Yeah, yes, I'm really enjoying it. And this was a extremely action-packed episode.
Yeah. And I think that it wasn't as bleak as the previous 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I like the characters more this episode. Like they were more likable, I think, this time around.
Okay.
Even though Mare does something pretty despicable towards the end. And so just so you guys know, this is going to be a full spoiler discussion. So please go watch the episode on HBO Max and then come join us for our little discussion. Okay? So Shari, we got that autopsy scene. Remember, you kept saying, hey, where's the autopsy scene?
2 things I asked on our video last week were, where's Aaron's bike? Mm-hmm. And when are we getting an autopsy scene? And we got both of those answers tonight.
You sure did.
Tonight's episode. So the episode started with the autopsy scene.
Yeah, and we asked you guys last week, we're like, hey, did she get shot? Because we were under the impression that she did not get shot. But apparently, at least she was shot at least once. And so that mark above her eye was...
Okay, here's what we aren't clear about with the autopsy scene. Did we get a cause of death?
I don't think so.
He and I both are asking each other, did we get a cause of death? Like, I feel like there's still no cause of death.
Yeah.
Again, if we missed something, let us know. Here's what I got from the autopsy. She was not raped, or probably not raped, and her finger was blown off by a gun, the tip of her finger, which it finds later in the episode, 13 miles, right, from where her body was dumped.
Yeah.
All of this is revealed in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
We also find out from the autopsy that she has consistent bruising all over her body, which means all the bruising was caused at the same time and possibly was caused by the altercation with the baby daddy's girlfriend in the woods.
Daddy's girlfriend, yeah.
So what killed her?
I think that the idea is that she was shot in the head, right? But they couldn't find a bullet. I'm not sure.
They found the bullet in the tree.
Yeah.
So what's the mark on her head and how did she die? Anyway, I feel like this should be clear, but to me it's not.
It is a little confusing. And believe me, I took a lot of notes, but what you just talked about, that was the most intriguing thing to me, was the fact that, like, her body's been moved, right?
Mm.
That they found her finger in this park that was far away from that party that she was seen at.
Mm-hmm.
And
from where her body was found.
And where her body was found. That's right. And so her finger's found there. And Mare gets Detective Zabel to call in the K9 unit to go find the bullet casings. She ends up finding the bullet casing because she finds a ricochet, mark from a ricochet, and then finds a bullet in the tree. There's some ace detective work right there.
Yes, there was. She was a hero detective.
That's why I did the thumbnail, yeah. And so, there's so many things to unpack with this episode, but this episode was much more about detective work versus, like, dysfunction, don't you think?
Mostly, yeah, but there's definitely the dysfunction creeping in. Her and her mom had a pretty nasty spat, where the friend walks in on their spat, and I kind of enjoyed that scene because the friend's like, sorry to the mom, and but they're pretty mean to each other, her and her mom.
She was cursing at her mom, and her mom just wanted to play Fruit Ninja.
I actually think she's mean to her mom. I shouldn't say they're mean to each other. I think she specifically is more mean to her mom and her mom just kind of fights back. But her mom is living with her, trying to help her with her messy life, and I think she should be more appreciative. So Mare is she's a good character because she's so fucked up, right? The best characters are kind of, in my opinion, are not perfect people. They're not always like really good people or really bad people. They're kind of these shades of gray, and she is. She's trying to do the right thing in her job. She's a detective. She loves her little grandson. She loves her daughter, even though they don't seem to get along.
No.
Right? So she's definitely a difficult person, and she does, like you said, the despicable thing in this episode to try to discredit her grandson's mother.
Oh, you're getting right towards the end there, baby. Should we talk about that part real quick?
Okay. I'm just saying, you said there's no dysfunction. Mare is dysfunctional, though, and that shows up pretty clearly in this episode.
Yeah, that's a major part of this show. And you know what? You're right. It does show up. Like in the very beginning, besides her having that conflict with her mom that you were talking about, there is also the conflict with, dude, I got to get that actor's name, man. The guy from The Office that's Frank on the show. I got to get that actor's name. But like she goes right over to his house because her ex-husband just happens to live behind her house, right?
Yeah.
She goes over and confronts him.
And also because, as the fucked up character, she's a very impulsive person. We've seen this character who should not be impulsive as a detective is very impulsive.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things you can kind of see from a mile away, you know, because I could tell she is this impulsive woman. She goes over to Frank's house, confronts him about potentially being the baby daddy of DJ, right?
Yes.
No, wait. Is DJ the little kid?
DJ's the baby. Aaron's
baby.
baby.
Dylan is the dad. Yeah. Dylan is the maybe not dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she confronts Frank about that and says that, you know, Aaron was seen with you and you brought baby formula and diapers into her house.
Why would you do that if you're not the father?
Yeah, and she's saying all this to him right in front of his future wife-to-be, right?
And
cursing.
And her kids.
Yeah.
It's a very awkward, like, family scene.
But you don't think that he is the murderer, right?
No, I don't think he's the murderer.
Yeah. The way he seemed very sincere, where he's like, "Hey, I'll take a paternity test. I don't care. Let's just do it."
Right. It will be proved, and he's going to take it, I assume, and it'll be proved that he is or is not the father. I don't think he'd be so willing if he was the father.
Correct. Yeah. So we see a bit of that in this episode, right, with the willingness to comply with the police, right? Because one other act of willingness is the deacon, right?
That's enter number 2.
He's the number 2.
Enter number 2 suspect.
Yes, right? Yes. So, and boy, it sure does seem like he might be the guy. So we see a scene with the deacon. I'm just trying to find his name in my copious notes.
Deacon Mark.
Sure. All right, fine. Deacon Mark. That works. Deacon Mark, Mayor and Detective Zabel go to interview him in the church, right? And they're interviewing him, and he's got these great answers. They're like religious-backed answers. He seems like a very devout servant of the church, right? He's very smooth. He doesn't stutter. They don't catch him in anything, right? At the very end.
Yeah, but he gives like the textbook religious man answers. And I just want to say real quick before they go and interview him, Detective Zabel's like, "Oh, we're going to talk to him in the church." And Mare says, you know, kind of this smart thing, like it's harder for him to lie, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think she's, again, an interesting character because she does manipulate and she does play on people's emotions, what they care about. And just that little comment says she's willing to play on someone's, you know, dedication, someone's vocation to the church to try to get what she wants.
Yeah.
And that other scene that she manipulates Detective Zabel is where she gets him to bring the dogs.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because he has the authority and she doesn't. And she does kind of this clever thing where she manipulates him. Anyway. Yeah,
he's like a county detective. He's the one that gets the dogs for you. You're right. Yeah.
Right. She gets him to get the dogs, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't make that choice on his own. Anyway, so they go to the church to interview the priest, and he gives those textbook answers.
They do, but they kind of address the elephant in the room, right? The elephant in the room is, like, it's what we're all thinking because we've seen all these murder shows. The elephant in the room is, hey, you were alone with this girl. Priests have a bad reputation of being alone with children.
Yeah.
Right? And then he says, well, you know, I would be alone with the child because it's part of my job. I think he does say the word vocation, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he would do it because it's what he's supposed to do. And he also says this one line that kind of stood out to me where he said that he was a vessel for Christ, right? He was doing the work of Jesus, right?
Right.
And then Mare kind of makes this kind of smart out joke. It kind of made me laugh out loud. She's like, well, when Aaron called you, was that you on the phone or Christ?
Was that God himself?
Right. Christ himself.
She's a smart ass.
Yeah, I love that. But Shari, that kind of brings me up per smart ass thing. I kind of wanted to ask you this. Have you ever noticed that there's essentially 2 types of detective shows, right? There's like the procedurals where it's a different case, like pretty much every episode, like your Law and Order, maybe like, you know, NCI and whatever the fuck those shows are called. CSI, but then there's like NCIS, all that kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
And there's like, you know, new mystery.
Bones.
There you go, right? And maybe Bones might have like a mystery that is a few episodes, right? But then you have shows like this, especially like on HBO, where it's like the whole season is one mystery. And a lot of the times the detective's personal life and their dysfunction is a big part of the show too. Do you feel like that's like the 2 different types?
I haven't thought about it, but yeah, that kind of probably summates it. I think the far better type of show is the one that gets into the people's personal lives. I mean, this show's reminding me a little bit of Sharp Objects, which is another HBO show and a really excellent book by Gillian Flynn. And that's so much about Amy Adams' character and her life. Meanwhile, she's trying to solve a mystery, and it's almost like when you're watching the show, what are we really interested in? I mean, you want to know who did it, but you get so involved in the character. That's almost really what we're here for, you know, and Mare's kind of turning into that, I think. And the best thing is a lot of times who they are, who this character is tied into who did it. So that's kind of the surprise, right?
Right.
So while we're looking at all these suspects, we should be looking, in my opinion, at Mare's life to try to help us understand why this happened and who did it.
Yeah, but you see, that's kind of one thing I don't like, right? Because sure, it's a good, finite, complete story where, you know, it ties into the character's life, right? It's directly connected to them. But I do like the idea of like, this is a fucked up detective. This is a fucked up person trying to solve a mystery, and they have all these problems, but they're going to move on to the next case. And maybe there's going to be another season. Maybe there's going to be another season after that. Like, kind of like Jessica Jones, like in the comics at least. I like the idea of like, hey, we really do care about their personal life, but I want to see more. Like, I like this character so much that like, if this story is done with this season, I'm actually going to be kind of sad. I like her a lot. I like Zabel a lot. I want to see like multiple seasons, multiple murders.
Are there, when it comes to this kind of show, are there usually multiple like seasons?
No.
I mean, it seems like they do kind of wrap up.
They do, right? Exactly. Like even with like let's say True Detective, right? It's like a different detective each time, and it is kind of personal each time too.
I think it's because what happens in these seasons is so detrimental and so important to the lead character or lead detective that it's life altering, and maybe they don't go on to just continue to solve cases and be okay.
That's a good point.
It's because it's that kind of situation.
Maybe they don't even like live sometimes too.
There you go.
Yeah. And you know, this kind of in the very beginning of this episode reminded me of yet another murder mystery on HBO with The Outsider, right? Because it was like, look how many people are affected by the grief of this one murder, right? Because in this case, now you have Dylan, who's been shot in the back by Erin's father.
Was he shot in his butt?
I don't think he was shot.
Well, his legs might not work, and they said something about posterior.
Okay, but like, I mean, doesn't that just mean your back though? The posterior definitely means your ass.
No.
Yeah. I think like when they say posterior, it's like that's the back of you and whatever. But no, I don't think he was shot in the butt. It looked like he was shot higher than the butt. But like, look at that. He's in the bed. And, you know, they're like, is he ever going to walk again? And then the dad is arrested for shooting this guy that didn't even necessarily do that to his daughter, right?
Yeah.
So all these lives are impacted, not to mention that, like, what's going to happen with this baby? You know, it kind of just reminded me of The Outsider a little bit.
Yes.
Hold on. So then Adit wrote a little comment. So this series is on HBO and HBO Max. Yes, Adit. You can watch it if you have cable on HBO, or you can watch it on HBO Max. I think HBO Max is totally worth it, by the way. I think like 80% of the stuff that we've been reviewing on my channels has been from HBO Max these days. All right, thanks, Adit, for watching. So let's jump back into what we're talking about. There was no sexual assault with Erin's death, right? She was not sexually assaulted.
So why is she naked?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she naked? We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Any speculation?
Okay, so I actually have a suspect, I think. I think it's going to be the other priest.
Her cousin?
That's right, because it's like what you said. It ties in with Mare, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. He goes to her house. It's her cousin. And then he's connected to the other priest who's like the glaringly obvious suspect.
Okay, maybe you're right.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we know so little about her cousin, and I just can't comment. I don't know. I see no connection, but...
Yeah.
That might be still to come. We have 4 episodes. This is not a very long series.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with these slow burn shows, right? Is that they'll whip out a character like that, and they're like, oh, remember this guy was on the show. Like, he's not really on your radar, but you're like, no, but he's been there. That happens a lot.
I don't think that's a problem.
You don't think that's a problem?
No, I don't think that's a problem. I like that there's all these people introduced, and it's hard to figure out which one.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's kind of true to probably real life and what it would be like.
Yeah.
speaking of whipping out a character and then not paying much attention to him, Guy Pearce is barely in the episode.
Yeah.
And when they show the previews for next week, he's not even featured in the previews. And what did we find out about Guy Pearce tonight? He did go on a date with Mare. I'm not sure why he wants to date Mare. She does not seem very appealing as a date to me. Although in this episode, 2 men are interested in her, and one of them is Detective Zabel. He flirts with her.
He does at the very end when he's very drunk. And I want to give...
That's when the truth comes out, though.
Yeah, well, I want to give credit to Evan Peters because I think he did a really awesome job being, like, pretending to be drunk, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't he do a good job? Like,
yeah,
that's a long scene.
He was funny and cute and sweet. And he has been consistently as the show progresses. And he is the character I began to enjoy the most that I haven't previously. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I started to like him a lot more this episode. And, and it's a lot of it is because of that drunk scene. But he's clearly interested sort of in Mare.
That's how you took it? When he's like, I'd much rather be hanging out with you. You took it as he wants to get with her.
I take it as he's interested in her.
Okay.
On more than just a coworker relationship.
Okay. Well, I kind of have a controversial thing that might go along with what you're saying.
Okay.
Because you're saying, like, oh, Evan Peters is into her. Why is Guy Pearce into her? And, like, Kate Winslet is, like, a beautiful woman, right? Just naturally. And, you know, they've done all they can to kind of make her unattractive in this show, right?
She's still beautiful.
Yeah. And this show, there's not really a lot of attractive people on the show, men or women, right? Like I'm not saying like the cast. Obviously, all actors are good looking and stuff, but they really don't try to make anyone stand out. So I think that Mare might be this kind of catch. You know, like I think I would definitely be attracted to her.
Well, Guy Pearce has revealed that he wrote some sort of, I don't think he said bestseller, but it was a popular book, and a lot of ladies were throwing themselves at him. Yeah. And so I don't know that he needs to like fight for Mare or anything, but that was, he said 1996. They went on a date, and he revealed he wrote the book in 1996. Yeah. His son was 2 years old. He reveals a little bit, which I wonder is going to come up later. Maybe he had a son and an estranged relationship with his ex-wife. Yeah, and he's good with his son, is what he said. Mm. But it was all very vague, and he didn't go into it. And I'm doing the math. His son's got to be in his 20s now, and I'm just kind of wondering if any of that's going to matter. Why is he in this town? Who is his son? Yeah. These questions are coming to my mind. I don't feel like this is a show that will reveal information like this without it maybe coming to matter at some point. Okay, well, that kind of reminds me of a question I have that might tie into the answer to that. Like, who's this guy that the old lady from the first episode, like, she lives right behind him, right? And she says he's a creep. You know which kid I'm talking about? I wrote down his name. The one who spray painted her house? He did graffiti. Her shed. Yeah. So her name's Betty, right? And this is like Leahy's son. That's what they refer to as this kid. He's like someone named Leahy's son, right? And she mentioned he's a real creepy guy. And also one other thing I was going to ask you about too, and maybe some people in the comments can address this too. There's this one scene where they're looking at the video footage of him graffitiing the side of this house. Right, and it's like clear. Okay, the detective found him, but then Mare deletes the footage. Like, why did she do that? I don't know why she did it. That's why I was thinking. I turned to you and I said, "Who is this guy? Yeah. Why would she want to protect him?" Yeah. And I was thinking about the name Leahy, which they say his name, and that's his last name. Yeah. The kid who did the graffiti. Yeah. And from what I recall, this is what I came up with in my mind. They said that. So Aaron's dad, whose name's Kenny. He's ready to all these Ross guys. Took the baby daddy. What's baby daddy's name? Dylan. Took him at gunpoint down Leahy Road. Oh, okay. So I don't know any other connection except that's the same last name, and there's a road in the town named Leahy with the same last name as this kid. Yeah. So maybe it's someone important that we haven't been introduced to. Maybe it's someone we have been introduced to and we failed to like note it. Yeah. If anyone knows the connection. But she did erase that footage. I'm not sure if it's because she thought the old woman deserved it because she was talking shit about the boy at the food drive or something. Yeah, but like I don't think she even saw Betty's the name of the old woman. I don't even think she saw Betty saying that, right? Her mom saw that, but she didn't. Okay. Right? Yeah. There's something going on there. That's definitely something where it's like we should be paying attention to this. Yeah. So we're noting it, right? Yeah. It's kind of like how the last episode when the woman with cancer, Dawn, who works in the convenience store, stops the owner of the restaurant guy, who later goes on to throw milk through Mare's window. She just stops him from chasing after her with a look. And I'm like, what's that about?
Yeah.
What's her relationship with him that she's able to stop him with a look?
I remember you mentioned that last time, too.
Yeah, well, they haven't explained that yet. And now we have this question about the Leahy kid who did the graffiti. Why is Mare protecting him and deleting his footage?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these could all be things where when we look back after the show, we're like, oh, okay, we really ran into that and that was nothing.
Yeah.
Or it could be like, oh, hey, we were kind of onto something.
Well, it's a mystery show, so we're maybe dissecting everything and we don't need to, but maybe it is just an example of her character, which is that she's willing to break rules for her own personal ethics code, or her own personal reasons.
Yeah, but like, what does she benefit from deleting incriminating footage about him?
Like I said, maybe she just doesn't want him to get in trouble. I don't know. For something stupid.
Okay. So I have essentially like two more things I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
One involves the scenes from next week's episode, because it kind of...
Well, let's say that for the very last, because that's the very last thing.
Okay, then I think that we should also talk about like what Mare does that gets her in a lot of trouble.
Okay, that comes before.
Right. You want to do that then?
Sure.
All right, so Mare goes into the evidence locker. She takes out these little tabs that have like aliens on them, and it's like, okay, it's drugs. I didn't realize it was heroin, but that's what it was. I thought it was like just acid or E or something.
Yeah, I didn't know what she was up to.
I'm not a big drug guy, so I don't know. But anyway, she takes them, and you're like, okay, well, she's just gonna like go do drugs on her own? Because she's had a pretty horrible day. Like, do you think that you'd be able to do that face that Mare does? There's this face that Mare does when people are like, your son killed yourself because you suck. And that happens like to her like 3 times in a day. And then she just kind of does this face where she just kind of pauses. And
she almost like, I feel like she goes blank or something. Like she can't handle it. It just like wipes her clean.
Yeah.
It's the most expressionless she gets almost, right?
Yeah. And like multiple people call her out on it. Like Frank calls her on the beginning. He's like, I'm willing to talk about my son, right? He does that. And then like someone else said something about her and the son. His wife or his girlfriend that they had a kid with, right? You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Mare goes to talk to the mother of her grandchild.
Carrie.
Yeah,
Carrie.
And then she says something miserable too. She's like, your son hated you before he died. All right. And then she does that blank look that you were talking about too.
I think it's because there's truth to what they're saying and she doesn't know how to handle it. Let's not forget the upcoming episodes of her going to a therapist for grief counseling.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if she ever went or has started to go and neglected to continue to go, but she apparently needs to, and her boss tells her to go.
Yeah.
Which leads us back to what she did this episode.
Right. And I'm going to talk about that one second, but that also is another thing when I was talking about the sort of series-long mysteries with the character that's like a fuck-up, is that 9 out of 10 times they end up going to a counselor, right, during the show, too. They usually end up having to go to a counselor because their life is so fucked up.
Okay.
All right, but anyway, the reason why she's going to the counselor is because she takes the heroin from the evidence locker, and she actually plants it in the car of the mother of her grandchild.
Who's trying to get custody.
Right. So she's like framing her essentially so that she can't get custody of her kid.
Yeah.
That's messed up, man. I did not see that coming.
It's a total abuse of power.
Yeah. And so she gets caught. She gets busted by her chief, and he says you have to turn in your badge and your gun. You know, and we see a picture of her dad and her when she was like a little kid, and her father, who he died when she was 13. And
it also reveals that he was a detective.
Yeah. That was actually a really great scene, too. She says it's to Guy Pearce. And maybe the Guy Pearce scenes are just so that we can learn more about her, you know? Just
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's helpful in that way.
Yeah.
She's talking to him as if to the viewer, someone who doesn't know her.
Yeah. And so she explains like that she really loved her dad, that he was a really great guy, and that she doesn't like her mom at all. They can't stand each other. And that her father was a detective, and that's why she's a detective. But it didn't matter. They were best friends. And if he shoveled shit, she'd be shoveling shit. That's what she said.
Right. She was just going to take after him no matter what he did, which is telling about how well she thought of him.
Yeah. So, you know, we learn more about her character, but she just ends up going down the wrong path, and now she's not even on this case anymore because she's gotten in trouble.
But she's going to keep working the case.
Oh, yeah. Which we see in the next episode. So that brings us to the coming up next week part, right?
Okay.
So the coming up next week part, they show that like there's a kidnapper, because we watch it with the captions on, right? and the caption literally read "kidnapper." Right? It said who was doing the talking, and the kidnapper is calling up her friend who has cancer. Do you remember the friend's name?
Dawn.
Okay, calls up Dawn.
Who's the mother of the missing girl?
Yeah. And she says, he says, I know where your daughter is or whatever. If you give me $3,000 or something, real small amount, right?
I didn't catch that.
Okay. Well, the kidnapper basically says, if you give me a certain amount of money, I'll tell you where your daughter is or something.
Okay.
So that leads me to believe that it's just someone like messing with her, and it's just like it's not going to amount to anything.
I'd be surprised if it's that easy.
Right. But if we're talking that there is some sort of like creep killer person, then I would bet money on Guy Pearce being that person.
That killed Aaron?
Maybe, but like maybe kidnapped the previous girl.
I think there's definitely more going on with Guy Pearce than has been revealed. Yes, maybe he's the killer. I don't know. There's several people who could be the killer. We don't know yet, and the show's revealing what they want us to see right now. So there's some little clues though that stuff is up with him.
Yeah.
Like I said, they had that dinner. He says a few little choice comments about his son. There's something else that happens where I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it was with Evan Peters, who is Detective Zobel. Zabel, because the showrunner Zobel. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I did notice that.
I was like, those are very similar names.
Yeah.
Zabel, which is an acronym for Blaze. I just want to say.
Whoa, that's hot.
I can't help it. I just think about things like that. But Detective Blaze.
Yes.
We found out something else about him I didn't know when he was drunk, which is that he's from the area.
Oh, yeah. He had like a little high school reunion.
He's celebrating a high school reunion, very much like she is the very first episode celebrating something from high school with her classmates in the bar when she meets Guy Pearce.
Good point.
So for me, this is important because I think whoever killed Aaron has to be from the town. And I'm just kind of wondering what his background with the town is. We haven't heard anything about it. This is the first we've heard about it.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't even know he was local. He seems like a fish out of water.
He did, yeah. Like he didn't know anybody, right? And that's a small town where everyone knows everybody. Everyone's each other's cousin.
Right. So he is local, though.
That's a little weird, yeah.
So we found that out.
He told this really poignant story, too, I liked, where he was like really into this one woman. He was going to get married to her, and then she called it all off. And just woke up one day and said she wasn't into him, right?
Yeah, but there's so much more to that story that we don't know. Why isn't she into him?
Yeah.
What isn't he saying? There's so much that we don't know about that. And what happened to her? Oh, she was at the party, he said.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah.
And, he does have access to a gun, right? So shot off her finger.
Yeah, and like that reminds me, who else has a gun?
They mentioned that the only people that had access to the gun were the dad and Dylan.
That we know of.
Right.
This is important. Oh.
So much to talk about. Look at this.
And because there's an action-packed episode. The last important thing is the priest has Aaron's bike.
I know. I was thinking like, oh man, we haven't mentioned that. And then if we didn't, the people in the comments would just be like, you didn't mention the bike, bro.
Well, I was waiting to find out where the bike was. The priest freaking had it. He was also her last phone call.
Yeah.
She called him at 10:55 at night on a friggin' Saturday night. Shady. And he's trying to say it's not. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And he threw her bike, which he had, into the river.
Yeah.
Guilty.
That's why I totally think it's the other priest. Because, like, maybe he doesn't know the other priest did it, but he knows that her bike is at his house and he drove her somewhere or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
That's what I think.
Maybe. So far, he's giving me no bad vibes. That would be a surprise.
It's too obvious that he'd be the killer if he's dumping the bike in the...
I agree, but I think he's shady. I think he has...
he definitely is.
I think he probably had a sexual relationship with her.
Yeah, maybe he's
trying
the baby daddy.
He's trying to cover something up, but not necessarily her murder, but he's trying to cover something up.
Yeah.
And if you're a deacon priest, not sure what the difference between a deacon and a priest is, but if you are, he's around the collar. If you are that person, you're not supposed to be having sex with a 17-year-old girl.
No.
So he's got stuff to hide.
Yeah. Most people shouldn't be having sex with 17-year-old girls, But I mean, especially priests. But so anyway,
you digress.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, I think that's a good wrapping up point. We've done this for a half hour. Some of us have to go to work tomorrow morning. But it looks like a lot of you have been following us right now tonight. That's awesome. Thank you for watching.
Any comments, please like and follow and subscribe.
All right. Say it with some emotion there. And then there we go. So thank you guys so much. We'll be here next week to talk about episode 4. And, you know, we'll just keep some more content coming on ANCHORPETE. You guys have a good night.
Sweet dreams.